Congress makes 50 new crimes per year. Can you imagine such a thing? 50 new crimes per year. So this is something that was legal last year, is a felony this year, and will send you to jail or prison. That's just not normal. Normal countries don't do things like that.
I heard you speak a little bit about the living conditions and how prison reform is a huge concern of yours now. Now, I've known other high-profile cases. The minute they start to speak on anything, immediately they're shipped around. You found a way through your communication, which I read through the Huffington Post,
right.
You found a way to not be affected by the diesel therapy. And for those people that don't know what diesel therapy is, I'm going to let you explain it. But explain how you're able to continue outing the prison system and the work that needed to be done and not getting shipped around.
It was an odyssey. Before I went to prison, one of my attorneys said, hey, once you get comfortable, write us a letter and we'll email it around to your supporters. There were like 600 people who had signed on to an email list just wanting an update to see how I was. So 6 weeks in, I wrote this letter and I told a couple of stories that I didn't even realize were stories about the guards breaking the law in targeting me. So I sent it to my attorneys. I didn't realize that one of my attorneys was friends with Arianna Huffington. And so she sent it to Arianna, and Arianna plastered it as this banner headline on the Huffington Post. I got more than 1 million hits. And within days, it had been picked up by every major newspaper, all the network news broadcasts. CNN Jake Tapper came to the prison to interview me. I was on NPR from the prison. It was ridiculous. And so the guards started threatening me. And then there was one who was actually friendly. Like only when we were alone, he was friendly, he was supportive. He actually told me once that he thought it was a miscarriage of justice that I was in there. And he said to me, hey, you need to watch out. They're talking about putting you in diesel therapy. I said, what's that? I had never heard of it before. Well, what it is if you're a prisoner who's deemed to be something of a troublemaker, they will put you in transit status. Now, they'll put you on a prison bus, send you to USP Canaan, the penitentiary, which is a transportation hub for the Northeast. You might be in Canaan for a week, a month, 6 months, whatever, you don't know. They put you on another bus to Harrisburg. In Harrisburg, they put you on a Conair flight to USP Atlanta. You stay there for a period of time. Then they send you to Oklahoma City, which is the national transportation hub. From there, maybe you go to Yankton or Springfield or Denver or Lompoc or whatever. Well, they can keep you in transit status for 2 years. The thing is when you're in transit status, you don't have access to email, to a phone, or to a pen and paper. It's a way to legally silence you. So what I did is I wrote about this immediately and I sent it to Arianna. And she immediately published it at the Huffington Post. And again, it went viral. It went everywhere. Well, Oliver Stone and John Cusack tweeted it. They tweeted, hands off John Kiriakou. And the peace group Code Pink asked all of their members to call the office of the head of the Bureau of Prisons and complain. They logged 1,600 calls to the Bureau of Prisons saying, you better not put him in diesel therapy. And they all backed off. All those BOP officials, they all backed off. And I knew that I was Teflon after that. So what I did is I filed a Freedom of Information Act request on myself. And it was actually very quick. It only took about 4 weeks, but I got a big fat package of stuff back. Most of it was useless. It was my visitor list. It was my medical records, just stupid stuff.
Right.
But there were 8 pages in there that were very clearly marked FOIA exempt, do not release to inmate. So it was one of two situations. Either the person doing the FOIA request was so friggin' stupid that they didn't see these giant red block letters at the top and bottom saying, "Do not release to inmate." Or somebody took pity on me and they released it to me on purpose. So what it was a series of memos going back and forth between the warden and the BOP saying, what do we do with this guy? He's famous and we're not sure what to do. And then finally, the warden wrote it wasn't even a memo so much as it was like a sign in these huge capital letter block letters that went all around the prison. And it said, "Caution, inmate has access to the media." And then underneath that, it said, "Inmate is not to have any contact with the public, has access to the media." So I knew I had him by the balls. I knew that I could say anything that I wanted, and there was nothing they could do to me. And so that's what I did. I ended up writing 19 blog posts, and they became this book. I called them Letters from Loretto, and I incorporated them into this. Before the book was even published, I won the Penn First Amendment Award from the Penn Center USA, which is like the preeminent journalistic freedom organization.
So prison was quite an experience for you with what you've accomplished and seeing things. I mean, it's not very often that somebody from one side of the law, from the side you were on, gets to see it from a complete opposite point of view. Aside from being away from your children, what was for you probably the toughest portion of the whole prison sentence?
You know, it was Groundhog Day. It's every day is exactly like every other day. And it doesn't matter if it's, July 4th or it's Christmas or it's a Sunday or whatever. Every day is exactly like the next and or the one before. That was one thing that got old really, really fast. The other thing that bothered me was these arbitrary, nonsensical rules. Most of these guys are they were scrubs from the military. They washed out of the local police academy. They couldn't get a job doing anything else. And literally the only qualifications you need to be a prison guard are you have to be either working on a GED or with a GED or a high school diploma and never convicted of a felony. That's it. So the cream of the crop, they're not. And then having to, answer to these guys, that took some getting used to. And a lot of them would try to bait me. And I never took the bait. Never. Which just would enrage them more. There was one cop. He had a reputation of being the worst of the worst. He was the only guard who wore a stab vest because he was just such a total psychopath that he was justifiably worried that somebody was going to stab him. He even covered up his name with a piece of electrical tape because he didn't want anybody to, get released and then come looking for him. So one of the Italians, my closest friend in prison, said something to him one day. He said, "Hey," his name was Blue. His nickname was Blue. We don't know what his real name was. He said, "Hey, Blue, where are you going to be stationed the next quarter?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to be in Central 1. And he said, the Italian said, "Oh, my friend John's in Central 1. And Blue said, "The CIA guy?" And the Italian said, "Yeah." Blue says, "I never mess with that guy." And the Italian said, "Yeah, why not?" And he said, "That's all I need. I work my 8-hour day, and then I go to my car, and CNN's waiting for me." He said, "No, thanks." And that's how they all ended up being. They just left me alone.
That's good. Yeah. Unfortunately, not everybody gets that same experience, but it's good that you found a way to really work the system to your benefit. What were some of the biggest reforms? You said there was a lot of reform needed from what you've seen. Just to talk just a second on that, what was the real issues that you saw?
The biggest overall umbrella issue is it has to be sentencing reform. These draconian drug sentences that we have, they have to be, and I'm not talking about just curtailed. They need to be dispensed with. We lock up more people than any other country in the world. I mean, you've heard the statistic. It's chilling, but it's true. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. That's not an accident. We put ourselves in that position. Congress makes 50 new crimes per year. Can you imagine such a thing? 50 new crimes per year. So this is something that was legal last year is a felony this year. and we'll send you to jail or prison. That's just not normal. Normal countries don't do things like that. We've got to start with drug laws and drug sentencing. On a more day-to-day level, it's got to be medical care. I mean, in the very short time that I was in prison, I saw 4 guys die for no reason, all from preventable illnesses. And the shame of it is that nobody gave a shit that they died. You know, nobody intervened to try to help them. And that's just morally wrong. You know, the government is duty bound, legally bound to provide adequate medical care, and they don't. Now, if you want to get a little bit farther down in the weeds, food. You know, my first full day in prison, one of the Italians said, "Oh, it's Friday, it's fish day." I said, "Yeah, cool, I like fish." He goes, "Not this fish. We call it sewer trout," he said. "Don't ever eat the fish." So I went down to the cafeteria, and there are these boxes stacked up behind the chow line, and they're marked Alaskan pollock, product of China, which I didn't understand. I still don't understand. And then underneath that, it said feed use only, not for human consumption. And that was the fish that we ate every single week for the next 2 years.
It was Fish Friday, huh?
It was, yeah, Fish Friday was animal feed. Now, there was one terrible incident that actually made the press where the slaughterhouse, the packaging and slaughterhouse that provided prisons in our area with ground beef was based in Texas. And they accidentally mislabeled a shipment of ground beef. It was actually a shipment of dog food. And it was mislabeled as ground beef, and they sent it to us, and we ate it.
Wow.
The shame was not even that we ate dog food. The shame was that nobody even realized we had eaten dog food because it tasted exactly the same as the ground beef that we always ate. That's how low the quality of the food is. It's not human quality food. This company was fined $18,000 payable to the U.S. Treasury. So we never got any of it, even indirectly. But it's just one example of how prisoners are treated as subhumans.
So having money in prison is a luxury.
Oh my God! If you have
commissary.
Oh yeah, and what I ended up doing is you know, I ended up eating all my meals with the Italians. And so, you know, 4 or 5 days a week, they cooked. They had a crooked cop on payroll. He would bring in pork loin and chicken breast and white wine for the marsala sauce and fresh tomatoes and mushrooms. And I actually gained 25 pounds in prison because of the way the Italians cooked. I mean, I ate like a king. Otherwise, you're exactly right. What you do is you go to commissary and you buy bags of chicken and tuna and, you know, instant rice and spices and you just cook for yourself. That's the only thing you can do.
You know, it's pretty sad that, you know, you guys have Abu Zabdea jumping from rooftops. You guys shoot him down with an AK-47, splats on the ground, and you find a way to keep him alive and bring him back to health. Meanwhile, you got Americans sitting in a federal prison that aren't dying from gunshots. They're slowly dying, but yet there's nobody there to help them. It's almost like you're better off being from somewhere else or being somewhere else altogether.
Yeah, listen, what you're saying is not a joke. You're actually
it's not at all
money. What you're saying is that Al-Qaeda prisoners get better food and better medical care than American prisoners. And that's the honest to God's truth.
Well, hopefully people like you that continue to fight this seemingly uphill fight, maybe at some point something that you're doing or something that many others are doing, and I like to include myself in that fight, maybe something will happen at some point. So after getting out of prison, you worked at home as a consultant for a medical firm. What was that like? Because you were working from home. Now, how much halfway house time did they give you?
None. Not a single day. That was my punishment for going public all the time. So I didn't
get served.
I did the whole stretch.
No good time, nothing.
I had my good time. And there's, of course, a federal mandatory 90 days or 10% of home confinement, whichever is less. I ended up with 87 days of home confinement. So a good friend of mine, his dad and mom were both doctors, and they put me on the payroll just to, help them get their business up and running. That lasted only for the period that I was on home confinement. And then I went briefly to a think tank here in Washington, the oldest think tank in town, focusing on prison reform issues. And then I ended up getting my own daily 2-hour radio show. I've got a syndicated newspaper column every week that runs in 220 small town papers around the country. And I speak at colleges and universities, not only around the United States, but all over Western Europe. I go to Europe all the time, talking about the American prison system and what's wrong with it.
All of these issues that you now are able to identify, how much of this were you aware of prior to going through it yourself?
None of it.
None of it. So with that said, in your next think tank, are you guys trying to find a focus on how you bring this awareness to the population, masses of people that do not know that it exists, that are just naive to the whole concept? How do you do that?
Oh, yeah. I do that mostly. Well, on my radio show, we do a 30-minute segment every Thursday called Criminal Injustice, in which we interview a reporter who covers criminal justice issues and the editor-in-chief of Prison Legal News magazine, Paul Wright. We have them every Thursday for a half an hour, and we talk about exactly these issues. And we've got a good listenership. We've got about 35,000 people that download the podcast every day. And then this is almost exclusively what I write about in my columns, because nobody pays any attention to these issues. We have so much to learn from our European allies about recidivism and job training and education. And we think we're smarter than everybody else. And we're not. We have a lot to learn. And so I work hard to get the word out. I've been fortunate on Capitol Hill, too, because I've talked to a whole bunch of congressmen and a handful of senators. And this is something where the right and the left have come together. So you've got the Progressive Caucus and the Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party, that are agreeing on these issues for different reasons. But they still agree that, especially on drug sentencing laws, that these laws have to go.
I'm glad to see somebody out there is putting in time into this, because where can people find your radio show, your podcast, information that you're putting out there that can help bring awareness? Where do people go for this?
Sure. It's if you're in the Washington area, it's on from 4 to 6 p.m. on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM. That's Washington, D.C. Otherwise, it's called Loud and Clear, and we're a podcast on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spreaker.
In an MSNBC interview, you stated, people are trained to lie for a living. They lie to everybody. You have to be able to separate lying from work for the betterment of the country and lying just for the sake of lying. Today, looking back, what is true for you when it comes to that statement that you made? If you remember that statement.
And that statement is exactly why you can't believe the likes of Gina Haspel, because at the CIA, we are trained liars. Your job is to recruit spies to steal secrets. And in order to recruit spies, you have to convince those people that you are their best friend in the world. That takes a lot of acting, a lot of lying. The problem is, as I told Chris Hayes in that interview, a lot of guys don't know when to turn it off. They lie to their wives. They lie to their bosses. And this is why the CIA has the highest divorce rate in all of the U.S. government. It's over 75%, because they just don't know when to turn it off. Well, you've got to know when to turn it off. Sometimes lying is good for the country because you're recruiting somebody who's going to help to protect the country. Sometimes lying is bad for everybody. And, then it's never acceptable. You just have to have a moral compass, an ethical compass, and know in your heart that you're doing the right thing.
Guys, I'm RDAP Band, Federal Prison Time Consulting. Every day, people helping people, community's method, one day at a time. Thank you very much, John. Have an amazing day.
Anytime. Take care.